right, 6 o'clock. Welcome everybody to today's planning board meeting here, January 27th. We will start with a reading of the. Would you like to go to that?
Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so using the Zoom login information provided. And they can also go to https://localscene.media/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have a public hearing for 32 Surplus Street subdivision. I'm going to recuse myself and our vice chair is going to lead that public hearing.
All right. So the way I would propose to do this is we're going to initially hear from the applicant. Well, let's first of all review all the correspondence. We have an application, a certified abutters list, an environmental impact statement, stormwater management, public hearing notice. All right. And we received a number of letters in support. Okay. So all of it was part of the record. So here's the public hearing notice. Pursuant to the subdivision control law, MGL chapter 41, section 81T. This board will hold a public hearing here and via Zoom tonight at the request of the applicant Matthew Dacey, Champion Builders, for review of a definitive subdivision plan entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan number 32 Surplus Street, Duxbury, Massachusetts, prepared by Grady Consultants, dated December 18, 2024. The proposal is for 4-lot residential subdivision at 32 Surplus Street. The property is located within the residential compatibility zoning district. Any person interested or wishing to comment on the proposal should appear at the time and place noted. A copy of the application and supporting documents are available at our website. And folks who need different accommodations would in fact be accommodated. All right, so let's first hear from the applicant. The applicant can make whatever presentation they want, including whatever supporting materials they want to rely on. And then we'll hear from the rest of the folk here who are interested. Questions should come through the board, through me.
Yes.
So if you have questions, the applicant, they should come through me. But we're going to hear the applicant first, and this board's going to ask any questions that it chooses to ask.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman. My name is Walter Tallman, an attorney from Norwell, representing the applicant Champion Builders. With me is Matt Dacey, Tom Dacey, and Sarah Dacey from Champion Builders, the applicant. Property owner Stuart Delano from 32 Surplus Road, and the project engineer Scott Bernaro from Grady Consulting. What I would propose to do, Mr. Dennison, is to have Mr. Bernaro take the board to the plan. And comments or questions from the board. As is noted in the public notice reading, this is a 4-lot subdivision. One of the lots is the existing home, which is the Delano family home for many, many years, and then 3 buildings there. So, Mr. Bernard, if you would present the plan, please.
Thank you for the introduction. Scott Bernard with Trade Consulting, representing the applicant. So what we have here is a definitive subdivision to create 4 lots, as Walter said. One of the lots is actually an existing house on it already. So essentially, it's the creation of 3 new house lots. The lots are fairly large in size. They well exceed the minimum for the zone. The existing site right now, there's a single family up here with the driveway to the right side of it. Pretty much all this area here is undeveloped. It's all wooded. We're proposing to create a new roadway coming up through here. With 3 houses off to the side. We did some perk testing on site. There's actually really good soil out there, so each house will have each individual septic system. The biggest thing I think most people are concerned about here is stormwater. It's always the biggest thing, our biggest focus we pay attention to. Right now, the proposed stormwater design is there'll be a collection with catch basins along the roadway. So there's 2 catch basins midway at the road, 2 catch basins at the end here. There's some piping that directs that water back here. We created a drainage lot. So it's a separate lot just to hold the water. It goes into a sediment forebay where all the sediment is settled out, and it goes into a drainage basin, infiltration basin. One of the requirements for doing the subdivisions is to make sure that there's no increase in the rate of water going off or the volume going off. So we have prepared calculations and provided that to meet that requirement. There has been some discussion about utilities. Our plan here is to propose this roadway as a private roadway. There's a couple of options here. We can propose it as a public roadway and put full utilities, and then that essentially gets the responsibility is given to the town to maintain, the roadway, the drainage system, the water lines. We are proposing to create a private roadway, actually, so there'll be a homeowners association set up for all these lots, and then the homeowners association will be responsible for maintaining all the utilities. So as it being private proposed, we would like to do 3 separate water lines going to each house. And those water lines will just be tapped off this main in the street on Surplus Street. There have been some comments provided by Pat Brennan, the peer review engineer. We have not yet responded to those. There's been some discussion on whether or not the water line can be allowed as 3 private lines, or if a main line will be required. So we're working through that right now, which is the reason for the delay in the comments. But I can go through a few of those here with our draft responses. A lot of these are fairly minor. So there's a requirement to locate all the 12-inch diameter trees within the roadway. Concrete bounds. So we will be proposing concrete bounds in all the geometry points along the road. This comes from the rules and regulations, but the rules and regulations call for an 18-inch berm along the edge of the road. We're proposing as 12. So we would like a waiver for that. And these responses will be written down and provided to the board after the hearing here. One of the comments.
So the way this usually works is we hear from Mr. Brennan, he then provides some questions, and then
Want me to
people
cut your waffle?
respond, and then we get comments back.
Just
And then once we've sort of sorted through what Mr.
strawberries with
Brennan,
this?
then the process is along. Why are we here?
We're here to introduce the project
Okay.
and to take comments from the abutters. I can turn it over to Pat Brennan if you'd like at this point.
No, I do, you keep going. It just seems a little premature, given the fact that you don't have responses back to Mr. Brennan.
If I may, Mr. Vice Chair, we did have a joint conference call that was very helpful with Mr. Brennan and with the town planner and so forth, and the other department heads just last week. So we're sort of working through that, but we will, by that, we're not expecting the hearing to get closed. Scott, if you'd also be kind enough, just identifying the plan where the existing hydrant is, and then maybe just finish that, and we can actually hear from the town's consultant, if that's what the vice chair would prefer.
Sure. Yep, so there's a requirement in town to have a fire hydrant within 500 feet of houses. Right now, there's an existing fire hydrant right at the end here of this proposed roadway on Surplus Street, which is much less than 500 feet to all the houses.
You said that this lot is largely wooded. Are you gonna clear more than 30,000 square feet?
30,000 square feet. I don't have that number offhand, the amount of clearing. But I can get that too.
Because there's a special, there's another permit required for that.
Okay.
All right. If you folks want to keep presenting, you can, otherwise I think we should hear from Pat.
I'm happy to turn it over to Pat.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Pat Brennan with PGB Engineering. Prepared a letter for I reviewed the project, prepared a letter that I submitted to the board on January 3rd, with about 14 comments. Scott was starting to hit on a couple of those. There's really no major concerns that I have in my comments. I just kind of identified where they do not meet the rules and regulations, where they're going to need waivers, or where they're going to have to add some additional detail to the plans. As Scott mentioned, when we had the design review team meeting a week or so ago, the water superintendent and the fire department were both asking for a water main in the roadway. They have it proposed, as Scott mentioned, right now with individual water services from Surplus Street to each of the 3 new homes. So, you know, that's obviously something that they're trying to work out with the water department at this point in time. My other comments, again, there's really nothing major in here. The drainage calculations look good. They are meeting all the standards for the stormwater that are required. So I think, you know, once they receive comments from the board and the public tonight, they can very easily address my comments, and then I can report back to you that those have been addressed. But again, nothing major at this point. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody had any.
I have a specific question regarding the water mains, the applicant. Reviewed the drawings to the best of my ability on the computer, and they were dated December 30th. They did indicate the location of the individual 1-inch water mains, but they didn't indicate the length. Do you have the length calculation for those water mains for lots D, C, and B?
Not offhand, lot D looks to be about
Yeah, well, I estimated
250 to 300, lot C similar length, lot B about half of that.
Yeah, I mean, by estimate, it looks like they're over 400, at least one of them, the way I look at it, because that rectangle in the adjacent lot, number 56 in the lower left corner is 200 foot front to back. And that house with the curved line, looks like it adds another 200 feet to the line to me.
Okay.
So that's why I was asking for the specific.
Yeah.
Provide that way.
Yeah, we can
We
provide
might have
that.
it next time. Tom might have it.
Oh, no, excellent.
Tom, while you look that up, with respect to the separate drainage lot that you're establishing or proposed to establish, who would be in charge of the ongoing maintenance in the future?
That would be the HOA, which would be the drainage, and also the roadway will always be private, and we did indicate at the request of the design review team that we will put covenant that the road will be made private in perpetuity. So it'll always be the HOA's responsibility.
Okay. And has there been any feedback, from the fire department on the proposed hammerhead end of the street here?
We've created lots like this before, and the fire department doesn't have any issue with it. And they were part of the,
report from the fire department on this file yet?
they were a part of the development review discussion last week
Okay.
Uh,
as well.
They were on the call, and that part of it was fine. He just talked more about, we talked most of the time about the fire hydrant and it being in close proximity to the existing fire hydrant, so.
I know that from the board's perspective, that's come up on other prior developments with the hammerhead and the
Well,
ability of
but-
the fire department to trust
Yeah,
to get their back.
And Mr. Wesleski specifically raised the issue in correspondence in terms of the width of the roadway and whether it complies with the fire department ruling.
Okay, again, that didn't come up during the
Yeah.
developmental review, but we can discuss it further with the fire.
He was
department.
satisfied in the comments, because it's 18 feet when I paved plus the berm. And that was suffice for the fire department.
We go back to the sewage infrastructure, the drainage specifically. As I noted, the board emphasizes the need for at least, quarterly inspection and cleaning essentially of the 4 pieces of infrastructure you mentioned, as well as the drainage lot in the back.
Mhm.
And we understand that those are the responsibility of the homeowners association. Of course, there's expenses associated with that, which we assume the HOA would collect. And my question relates to the inspections and the inspection records. If this were town infrastructure, we would have an assurance that the inspections were in fact done. I note that if the bases fill up, if there is maintenance that is identified but not performed, there could be a negative impact on the water quality of the Bluefish River from that. So what assurances, what mechanism can you offer the town to ensure that the water quality of this resource is maintained by the proper maintenance of this private infrastructure?
As with all stormwater designs in the state of Massachusetts, we provide a maintenance log, and that maintenance log is the responsibility of the homeowners association, well, of the owner, which in this case will be the homeowners association. And there are right in there requirements for, quarterly or biannually. Yeah, and we are outside greater than the 200-foot riverfront area.
Yeah, and I know, and I want to make sure that I make this comment publicly, that because of the topography of the land, it does look as if there is a built-in protection where there is a grade, there's a peak there in the grade, and the drainage lot is on this side and the river's on the other side. So I think it's a lower risk.
Mhm.
But I just, for my own edification, thanks for explaining that is a record-keeping process that the HOA will maintain. Correct. Thanks.
If I may, there was a question on the on the location from the existing fire hydrant on Circle Street to the dwellings proposed on lots D and C, which are the furthest 2 away. And from the hydrant to the proposed dwellings, as we have laid out, is 352 feet and 344 feet, well within the 500 feet as a typical written requirement. So that was where we had the discussion in the meeting, because the hydrant's like right at the entrance where we're going to be cutting in the road.
So they're good for you.
Yeah, it's just like additional, why do we need additional maintenance and care of the water department and all that type of thing, so.
Eric, does the applicant want to make any further submission? Does the board want to ask any further questions of the applicant at this point?
I think we've touched all the highlights.
All right, and as I understand, nobody's looking at closing or anything. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to open up for a public comment and question. If you have a question of the applicant, you can ask the question through me, and I'll probably screw it up, but I'll try. In any event, you can make any comment that you like, but what I need you to do is identify yourself and tell me where you live, and then we can go from there. So why don't we just, anybody have a comment?
I have a question.
Sure.
So my name is Ben Strong and I live at 62 Surplus Street, so I have property down there on the lower left-hand corner. So regarding the topography, if I understand it correctly, I think it slopes a little bit to the northeast. And there's kind of a low-lying area, which maybe is generally in the location of where the where the drainage area is going to be. So do you plan to regrade that whole area at all, or bring in any fill material? Or is it pretty much working with all the existing material on site and trying to keep the grade, kind of currently as is?
So one of the neighbors wondered whether you plan to regrade or bring in fill material.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so there will be some regrading here. With these projects, the grading is typically dictated by the roadway. So we have certain requirements for the slope of the roadway coming in. So yes, there will be some grading throughout the site. As far as the stormwater and runoff, what we do is we analyze where today existing conditions, where that water is going. And we identify those points and we measure through calculations how much water is going off in those directions. And with this design, we have to ensure that we're not increasing it. In most cases, we're typically decreasing it. So you won't expect to see any increase in runoff onto your property.
Other questions? Yes, Liz.
John Haggerty, 47 surplus. We're right across the street from where the road to the complex meets surplus. Two questions I have are, one, will there be lighting on the road that's being built? And two, is there any opinion or plan right now for tree removal or any changes in the natural growth of the lot? Those are my two questions.
All right, so we have, I'm gonna address one of them. We have a tree removal bylaw where if you're gonna remove a significant number of trees, that is gonna be regulated by this board. In terms of lighting, I have no idea, so certain.
I'll take that one. Typically, we do, a photo light post for each driveway. And that seems to be suffice for the street lighting along the street, and it's pretty typical around town, so I think that would probably be the safest bet, and we'll eliminate the entrance to the driveway, so safe now.
So in terms of sort of light pollution or light direction towards neighbors or even, immediate neighbors across the street.
Yeah, I think the closest one might be a couple 100 feet in from the cover on surplus, so. Shouldn't get too bad.
Is there a street light right there on Circle Street on this? Yeah.
There's a street light way down towards Washington Street.
Yes.
And there's another one, but there's no street light immediately in the area of the proposed road.
Right, no, we are. I didn't see one on the plan.
So we have a proposed plan with the first driveway, which would be for the future lot B. Approximately 100 feet in off the edge of Surplus Street. So I would, typically we put the post lights on the front yard side of the driveway. So it'll probably be 120 feet or something like that from Surplus. So I think that'd be right.
Further questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Peggy Hernandez at 98 Surplus Street, where there is a street light right at our property. But my question, can you please explain the policy on cutting down trees? Because I've just seen a ton of tree loss on Surplus Street. And you're saying there's a deforestation plan, but it's very frustrating to see us lose all our trees.
I agree. Thank you.
It's really bad.
Yeah, so there is we have a bylaw, part of our zoning bylaws actually, that require planning board review for clearing that exceeds 30,000 square feet. And quite frankly, we have done that over and over again. Some of the more recent developments have had the ability to do this because of dividing up into individual lots. But I fully understand your concern, and it will, if there's significant deforestation of this property, there will be permitting required.
But does the town require replanting in any way?
In some instances,
It's just really horrible. Our whole street has lost so many trees, devastating. Don't look like Duxbury when I moved.
They have a mile. Yeah, I mean, it's that way, but it's not. Right. Oh, yeah.
Follow up. With what you're saying, I live in number 26. Great neighborhood, great foliage, but I do see the foliage disappearing up and down Surplus Street, and for me, it's alarming to think that And I don't disagree with this development, I really don't. It's gonna happen sooner or later, but what I'm really concerned about is the departure of the foliage that really represents Duxbury as being the tree city. The
Correct.
city that is adored because of all the beautiful trees and foliage that we have. So that's just a comment, not an answer or a question. It's just so that you understand the concerns that we have up and down Surplus Street.
So I want, and you're gonna, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is a process. And it's a process that in some ways limited by state law, but otherwise comes under our local zoning bylaw. And absent waiver requests, we're required to look and see if this complies with it. There are a number of waiver requests that this board then has discretion to determine whether we're gonna grant the waivers.
Yeah, that, I'm not asking, I'm just.
Oh, no, I just want to give everybody.
There are concerns, legitimate concerns. We love the neighborhood. We love our neighbors. And we don't appreciate the thought of trees coming down to make way for another road. That's all.
I didn't take your comment as a criticism. I'll tell you, we don't usually get this number of people to planning board meetings. And I wanted to make sure that people understood what we had in front of us. So what? To the extent there's significant tree removal, that's gonna come back up. It has to come back up before this point.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, to that end on the tree part of it, the design of the road, was where, if you can see, there's a big lollipop, so that's basically the layout, but the actual roadway is significantly less than a normal subdivision roadway would be. So I think that in that spirit, it would probably maintain a little bit more of the tree line as possible. Beyond that, the kind of dark dots that you see, those are proposed trees that we'll be installing. Once the roadway infrastructure is put in place, basically the drainage and the three water lines coming in from Surplus Street. So. And this is all under the planning, one of the planning board's guidelines to minimize the disturbance of development. And I think that the team at Grady did a nice job of trying to fulfill that obligation, try to keep that roadway in the middle and the hammerhead to limit all of that work and to minimize the grading, so it cuts down on the amount of trees and stumps that we have to take on. So I thought, in that respect, they did a nice job with it.
There's somebody else who, yes.
Hi, Mike Calendro, 105 Surplus, how are you?
Good.
I wanna, it's a good question on the trees. The trees is 30,000 feet is the bylaw per, lot, correct?
Yes,
So once you approve the subdivision, it's 30,000 feet times 4, correct?
you're correct.
So you could be talking up to 120,000,
Exactly.
That's correct.
which is 4 acres, right?
Yeah.
Roughly. Obviously a concern. Couple of questions. I was concerned, I was confused on who the applicant was. I think the application lists the applicant as 2 different people on 2 different forms. I believe the first form it lists as Mr. Dacey. And on the second form listed as somebody else. Well, I guess the question is, who is the applicant?
All right, we can, that's an easy question to ask. Who's the applicant?
Matthew Dacey, owner of Champion Villas.
Thank you.
For publication purposes, it was Matthew Dacey, Champion Builders, Inc. That was noticed.
That's fine.
I believe the second form probably even came up correctly. Anyway, next question. Is this a by right project? You listed a bunch, you said there's some variances being requested. Can you list what those variances are?
I don't think anybody talked about a variance. They're looking for waivers.
Excuse me, waivers. So you asked for some,
The waiver is a very different issue. They'll have to go through the waiver requests individually at a subsequent public meeting.
are they listed somewhere that I can see them?
You get a waiver request.
We didn't ask for any waivers until Mr. Brennan suggested we might need, I think, 1 or 2 waivers, so we haven't put that together, but it'll be submitted well before the next vote.
All right, so we don't know the scope of the waivers.
Gotcha, thank you. Next question, traffic. So anybody who's here is familiar with Surplus Street, knows that it's a, you know, an unlined cut through, for lack of a better term. And I think that the application kind of breezed over traffic real quick, saying they don't expect any traffic issues, and I could not disagree more with that. I think that there should be some sort of a traffic study requested or done. If that's something
I'm gonna be candid with you, sir. I've been doing this a long time. 3 houses aren't sufficient enough to require that kind of a traffic study. It's just not.
I mean,
I don't see any likelihood that that's gonna be required.
I appreciate the feedback, but my comment is I do think there's a traffic study needed.
I hear you.
The runoff, my next concern is the runoff into the Bluefish River. Could someone explain how much of that property that's getting cleared is running off in, not the roadway? I understand the roadway is done with drainage, into a drainage lot, I think was the term. How much of the cleared land is gonna run off into the Bluefish?
All right, so why don't we ask that question about the drainage, and then we're gonna move to other folk who also have questions, because you've had 5 in a row.
There was actually only 3.
Sure. So, there will be no new runoff from impervious surfaces going in that direction toward the Bluefish River. All the runoff from impervious surfaces is directed into our drainage basin. And again, we analyzed this area for runoff that was heading off in this direction, and we are decreasing the flow in that direction.
Decreasing the flow to the Bluefish River.
Correct.
I saw other hands. Yes, ma'am.
Susanna Tuffy, 58 Stetson Place, abutting on the other side. Similar tree, I actually have a copy of the 611 is the land clearing and grading bylaws, in case you guys want to see it. I think it's important to know them all. You seem to be on top of it. So I guess the question is not really what the bylaws are, but how are they enforced through the waivers, and can we be a part of that process when they come back to address that in terms of specimen trees? And I'm a licensed wildlife rehabilitator in the state of Massachusetts, so obviously have some concerns around wildlife and some special concern that I know to be located in that area, so I can get that information to you. I do appreciate Stuart's communication with me as a neighbor, because we have a right of way that we're gonna ask a question about in addition. But obviously the wildlife, the forestry, and all of those wildlife are there for very good reasons. So, yeah.
Well, the short answer to the question you asked in the middle is yes, you can be part of this process going forward.
Yes. Right.
Yes, sir.
So I'm David Corey. My family owns the property abutting the development in the northwest corner. And I have a rather esoteric request, but it's important to us. And that is that in 1953, Ruby Graves, the previous owner of Mr. Delano's house, sold property to Eldon Wadsworth, the previous owner of our house. And in the process of that, Eldon Wadsworth granted an easement to Ruby Graves to allow passage across our property, a 23-foot wide right of way. And to my knowledge, this hasn't been exercised in the last 70 years, but we're concerned about new neighbors in that lot deciding that they want to make use of the right of way. The driveway coming down to our house is about 10 feet wide. The right of way is 23 feet wide. Somebody exercising the right of way has the right to pave it, to cut down trees and so forth, which could be very disruptive. Mr. Delano has been was a wonderful neighbor for 25 years and has been very cooperative, and suggested that he would arrange it so that the right of way would not be appurtenant to the new lots. And we're very grateful to his willingness to do that. But if the planning board was to make that a condition of approval, that would certainly ease our concerns in addition.
We don't do private property issues, but it does sound like you're most of the way there towards a solution. phone. They're gonna write it. I just, sorry.
My name is Jeff Hyde, I'm at 98 Surplus, my wife Peggy talked about the trees. My question is. Tree house and the families that go with it. What impacts has been determined that it might have on things like water pressure? With the pump house is right down the road from us. What do you anticipate the impact of this project will be on existing water supply?
Good question.
A minimal impact. I mean, we're just looking at 3 single family houses. It's a normal development in this area.
In other words, the pump house will have the capability of maintaining the same pressure as exists today.
I believe so, yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question just about the houses in general. So I assume it's the layout that's noted on the plans, kind of the exact layout of how the houses would be, or is there, kind of flexibility or room to work on that based on, your development plans, based on input from prospective buyers? And then also curious about the general sizes of the houses and the capacity of septic systems, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom, 15-bedroom, etc.
Yeah, you threw me with a 15-bedroom. I think the short answer is that they're proposing subdivision and the particular drawings are not binding on that in terms of trying to show what particular houses are. There are rules and regulations in Duxbury that provide for the amount of coverage you can put on a particular lot. And there are certainly some drainage rules in terms of how much you can, how many bedrooms you can have given your subject. Yes.
I'm gonna ask a 4th question, sorry. Does that mean that if the planning board approves this plan subdivision with, because I believe the plans specifically say 4-bedroom septics, is that binding or is that you're saying that's not binding?
I don't believe it's binding. I think it's the proposal. I think that most of the in all likelihood, they've made some judgments, but it's a subdivision.
No, I get that. If it says 4-bedroom septics on the approved subdivision plans, the board saying that that's not.
No matter what, you've got to put in a septic that complies with the septic bylaw. And that's gonna come down to how does the the property perk, how big is your system, how much room do you have? But they're not required to just do 4 bedrooms.
So is there anything else? I guess I guess my next question would be, is there anything else in the plans that's not binding? I guess it's, it's not obviously. Part of the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I can't answer that.
That's right. That's a fine answer.
All right. This is gonna continue because there's back and forth with the town's engineer. The process here where people ask questions and want their questions answered and have expressed their concerns is important, especially so the town engineer hears it, the planning board hears it. And so I want to give people a full and fair opportunity to just ask whatever they want. But other than that, we're going to continue this to another date. So before we continue to another date, I wanted to just see if there were further issues or concerns. Try to be direct on the things that we can answer and the things we can't. The young lady next to you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Mills. I live at 56 Surplus, which is the property right abutting. So I actually prepared something, and this is addressing the architecture and building a front and the natural beauty trees. So I'm a resident of the neighborhood, which is treasured for its historic charm, natural beauty, and unique character. The woods you're planning to develop have been a part of the fabric of this neighborhood for over 100 years. They're not just trees, but a vital part of the natural and aesthetic appeal of the street. These woods enhance the unique green quality of our area, providing a home to federally protected wildlife such as red-tailed hawks, owls, and osprey. They're a living reminder of this road's country heritage, which makes this part of Duxbury so special. What sets our neighborhood apart is its thoughtful preservation. Many homeowners have invested significantly in tasteful renovations that honor and uphold the architectural integrity and character of the area. This careful stewardship is what has made this neighborhood so coveted, and it's reflected in the significant property taxes we pay, 30% more than last year to preserve this legacy. As you move forward with development plans, I ask, what steps are you taking to ensure your project maintains the integrity and character of this historic neighborhood? Are you working with an experienced architect to design homes that harmonize with the surroundings? With all due respect, builder-grade homes often fail to acknowledge the architectural setting they're placed in, which risks detracting from the qualities that make this neighborhood so exceptional. We aren't opposed to development, but we hope it can be done thoughtfully with respect for the history, beauty, and community that makes this neighborhood a place we are all proud to call home. Thank you for considering the voice of our community.
Thank you. And so you would,
Yeah, just general timing overall, if, you know, in terms of how it clears planning board and.
so part of that is, when are you gonna get back to Pat? When's Pat gonna get back to you? What do you think?
There's still some discussions about the water line issue, but yeah, once that's resolved, we can get the comments back to that.
So when do you think we ought to have another public hearing? Pat, what do you think?
Like I said, that we're, like Scott just mentioned, the only real, I think, big outstanding issue is the water line issue, and that's something that they need to work out with the water department. In terms of them getting revised plans back to me, it'll only take me a day or two to get, you know, review those and get something back to the board.
Vice Chair, I mean, we expect to be with the water department in the next 2 weeks.
Do you want to do this a month out?
I think that would be fine for us, yeah.
So it's,
Is the call on the hydrant, is that with the fire department? I mean, with the water department, or the fire department, or the planning board, or I just wanna know, like. I mean, the regulations say within 500 feet, and we're well within 500 feet, so I don't think we need to have another hydrant, but. I'm not that. I'm just reading the regulation, I don't know.
yeah, I can assure you that, the planning board will, likely like input from both the fire department and water.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to look to the wall. Which I do over and over again, I repeatedly failed to look to the wall. Anybody who's on the Zoom, unmute yourself or just tell us who you are. And then can you raise your hand or how do we do this?
I think they can
Unmute yourself if you wanna.
We're raising.
All right. There's a person whose face showed up, so I'm thinking that maybe he'll want to talk.
Yeah,
Sir, where do you-
that's it.
What's your name?
So my name is Xavier Gasto. We're the owners of 44 Stetson, which is north of the property being developed or about to be developed. No specific questions. Obviously, a little bit sad to see all this woodland be cut down. So sharing the general concern that was expressed that some thought be given to replanting and also ensuring that the new development blends in nicely with the existing houses, but nothing more to add.
Thank you, sir. All right. So we're gonna continue this to the next one. And thank you all for coming out. Thank everybody for their very thoughtful comments. And we'll do this. Yeah. All right, I mean, so somebody else other than me has to move to February 25th.
I'll move the planning board continue the public hearing on subdivision application for 32 Surplus Street to Monday, February 24th.
Second.
So we're gonna need a roll call vote because Jen's online. Wayne Dennison, aye.
Matthew Ray, aye.
Pat Carpenter, aye.
Lawrence, or I?
Yes.
Kristen Rath abstain.
Jen Turcott, aye.
Okay, we're gonna do this on February 24th.
Thank you very much.
6 of them. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
We are.
I agree.
Oh.
All right. Something else, either temporary or administrative items?
Well, it's in the line.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to move out the agenda items up and push again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got. Yeah, I'll see how the process goes.
Skip on it.
Yeah.
Well, I go to work in the morning, home and they.
Yeah.
Can we do this in the other?
All right. See how the process goes?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
okay, good. All right, guys. We'll do it.
Moving up, the discussion about the 25 town meeting citizen petition, about Secretary Circle and Sunflower Circle as public ways.
Yeah.
Now, have anybody here to watch anybody brought forward their citizen petition?
My name is Bill McDaniel. I live at Secretary Circle.
Okay, that's great.
You don't want to have a petition.
Okay, great, thank you. All right.
Try to be a good neighbor.
Good one, quieter one. All right, so the planning board has been asked by the select board to review this and make a recommendation. And so typically what we do when it comes to clouds, when it comes to the public ways, is we go back and we look at what the discussion the planning board had with the builder and with the town to figure out what their recommendation at the time was. And so we went back and we looked at some of our minutes. We found out that because that there really wasn't anything definitive, that the planning board never said, yes, make a note, we definitely think this should be a town way, or make a note, we definitely recommend this train as a private way. And so we have to have that conversation tonight. Now, as it turns out, Jen Turcott was on the board. Jennifer Turcott, who's our board member who's on Zoom right now, was on the board at the time. So Jen, do you mind if we ask you about if you have any recollection of any of the conversations aside from the minutes that we received?
Well, Checkerberry Circle is the one off of Lincoln Street that is a 40B, correct?
Exactly.
So the planning board would have had little control over the design.
Right.
I'll speak for myself only in saying that if the street does not meet the design standards, then we should not recommend to the select board that it becomes a public way.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And on this design, I can't tell how wide the road is. Can anybody else?
She's looking at it.
Because it seemed like the paperwork that we received from police and from the fire departments, and the fire chief didn't have any And you can,
The fire chief came down, actually, the fire department came down a year ago last September.
Okay.
With the hook and ladder truck and went around. It's my understanding. But I don't have complete knowledge of it, that it was built to the specifications of the town.
kind of offhand, that's what I would have thought too. Seems like a generous.
See if I have.
You're done?
Good place.
I'm very rapidly going through the materials, 12, 13 files here, and just scanning them quickly. I'll note the fire department did raise a concern about on-street parking. Apparently there's no restriction on on-street parking. If there are cars on the street, it will restrict the ability of the fire truck to navigate the circle. Also, the DPW's apparently with insufficient time to evaluate this, raised significant concerns about the degree of maintenance required, because you have a cul-de-sac with grass. And if the town accepts the street, the town accepts the maintenance for all of the shoulders, or essentially taking the entire road layout and conveying it from private maintenance into public maintenance. So these are concerns that have been raised. They haven't been evaluated. Just based on that alone, I'd be very concerned about taking any motion on this at this time. It needs to be looked at more closely.
Did you just say that the circles have grass in them?
That's what the memo I just read very quickly
Yeah,
indicated.
they don't,
There's-
there's grass in them. They have,
Fundamentally,
there's
better.
crushed stone around it. And as far as the parking, it's 20 houses, single houses, of which 10 5 are the low.
Yeah, we're familiar with the.
Okay. On that, and so it's a 40B. The development is hopefully hoping to move forward as far as the whole state mandate thing on that. And obviously, we have teachers there, we have town employees that are there, so there's a benefit to that. As far as the parking, every house has at least one garage, some have 2 garages, and then they have their driveway. So, in the event that they have, whether it's Christmas or some other time, some holiday, is there parking on the street? Most likely there is, but normally there shouldn't be parking.
And one thing I would like to interject, Rebecca looked at the timeline and figured out that we have, that the select board, that we have until the 30th to make a recommendation.
This month.
Because we had, there was, once the petition went to the select board, then it kicked off a 45-day clock, and apparently probably with the holidays, we might have missed it, so we would have to make a recommendation. Well, we have the opportunity to make a recommendation by the 30th, which really puts you this meeting. But one of the interesting things is, I was going to say that I actually live on the street with a cul-de-sac, and we have an island in it, and the town does not maintain that. We do.
Yeah.
And so I almost wondered if we were considering making a recommendation to make recommend this as a public way. One consideration, if the DPW is concerned about maintenance, could that be that the citizens in the neighborhood would take care of that, that the town would actually?
We would not, it wasn't our expectation that it became the public way that the town would be maintaining those islands. Because as you go into the entrance, there's grass on the side, and the association is maintaining that, and that's all part of the contract, maintain that. So I meant, obviously, if that's a condition, it certainly is an issue to us, because there was no expectation that the town would assume that responsibility.
Did I assume that you have a homeowners association and those fees are what's paying for the landscaping at the entrance of the neighborhood?
Yes.
So this is a 40B. I actually sat on this.
Perspective. Does this ever come up?
Well, but if they were gonna do something other than what the town dictates to the street, they would have had to ask for a waiver. And they did.
Then in theory,
So in theory, it complies.
May I ask the chair, Emily? I mean,
Yep.
sorry, Kristen, another thing to think about too is not only the street itself, but the drainage and all of the maintenance associated with that drainage. a petition to accept this as a public way is also, the town is accepting all the responsibility for maintaining all of the drainage.
I would say that there's probably very little drainage, and the reason there's virtually no trees. My grass in the summer can attest to that. And if the roads, obviously, it's a new road, so it obviously maintenance will add things. You know, is it 20-25 years or so? I mean, our purpose, the way we look at it is, first of all, evaluation is taxpayers. Right? We're not asking for anything in anyone, any other taxpayer. And the second side of it is that this is a type of development I think you really want to encourage. It really solves a lot of issues in that it allows town people to live in the town. It also, it also teachers that are living there.
I completely understand your point. We're just trying to make sure that it
Sure.
complies.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Wayne's to Jen. So Jen, it sounds like Wayne said no, there were no waivers for the street itself, but can you find out about any drainage?
It's not good.
Well, this project was a 40B, so there was no planning board application per se.
No, it came to the zoning.
Yeah.
But, right, but he's looking through the ZBA notes to see if there was any discussion on that.
I don't
Yeah.
recall. offhand. We generally, when a 40B is proposed, the planning board is sent the packet for informational purposes only. I don't remember if we are asked to provide feedback to the ZBA like we are when, there's other items that go with the ZBA. I think it's just informational only.
So the CBA is the permit granting authority
Right.
with respect to almost every permit that's required under 40B. I don't see any request by the applicant for any change in the roadway delineations. But that said, we've been very hesitant to accept these type of private ways as roadways. But
Madam Chair, if I may, I have a procedural question, and maybe Rebecca may have this. If the planning board does not recommend the citizen's petition for acceptance as a public way, can the petition be brought forward again? And if so, is there a restriction on when?
I don't know the restriction, but I do like the dates, but I do know that it is the select board that is ultimately going to accept. You're just doing a recommendation. So you're just gonna say whether or not you support it today, and it's going to be kicked back to the select board, and ultimately they have the decision of whether to.
and then there's a vote at town meeting, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so there's a vote, a recommendation vote here. We recommend to the select board, they vote, and whether or not it goes in the warrant.
Right.
Not they recommend it.
It's my understanding that the petition will go to the town meeting.
Yes.
Obviously, at the town meeting, it needs a 2/3 vote. And accompanying the article is that there's the recommendations from the finance committee and the select board. And we're hoping that they give favorable consideration to that.
Can you look in your, is there anything from Pat, did he weigh in on any of this?
I've seen it in the map, but there's no DPW.
Yeah.
I didn't hear about snow plowing.
Yeah, the DPW, Director Shields, she does raise some significant concerns in her memo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our job is to look at whether or not, does it fall within the town regulations? Does it fall, were there any waivers granted? Is that it's the drainage, is there a drainage issue? And I think that,
Well, but I mean, when the DPW director says, I'm still looking for as-built construction
Yeah.
inspection logs and stormwater O&M plans. And that they're hesitant to take on this additional responsibility. I mean, what are we gonna do? Say, oh, I don't know. I'm not personally gonna disregard what the DPW says.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, if our role is a technical evaluation of compliance, I don't feel that we are sufficiently equipped to make that evaluation today. It just can't be done.
I would agree. I know, like we do, yes.
Maybe you can help me out as far as the distinction between in, the annual town meeting in 2024. It was approved, Cooper's Way, and in 2023, McLean Way. Now, those aren't 40B, but they meet the same town specifications. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is why those high end would be approved. You folks would approve that, but you have hesitant on 840B.
Oh, so just to clarify, it has nothing to do with the type of property. It has to do with Cooper's Way didn't have, I don't think they had any waiver requests. And so for there, it was very clear that they were meeting all the regulations. So it was very easy for us to make that recommendation. McLean, I think that there were some questions that popped up, but that one did go before town meeting and town meeting did vote that. So our concerns are something that we don't have any of the as-built, we don't have any of the plans. We don't know how wide the street is.
The street's 22 feet wide. I have the plans right here.
Oh, you do?
They should be in your packet.
We didn't see any
We
measurements.
couldn't find it.
It's very simple. Did you scroll down? That's okay. No, that's all right. There's a lot going on. Sometimes digitally, it's like,
It is 22. All
and it's also in the narrative, the decision.
right, thank you.
It's in the narrative of the CBA decision.
Which
It
area?
is, yeah, I was just reading it. It's like, actually, it's a comment from Sarah Wilson. She said that the street was too wide, 22 feet, and it should be reduced, but that basically you wanted it to comply, it couldn't do that. So
It was 22 feet. 22 feet was too wide.
it was just an abutter that was concerned that it was too wide.
Oh, okay.
It
Sarah
is
Wilson used
stated
the
on here
CBA.
that it's 20 feet. But it is in those plans, it is really small, but
As far as the 22.
yeah,
But then we don't know about drainage, right?
that might be in, I didn't like review those in the fine tooth comb, but
I mean,
it might be in those plans.
I see it, but I don't know. So what we've done since this is whenever we've learned that this has come up a couple, every year it comes up with properties that were built in the year or two before, or 5 years before. And so what we started saying is in our condition of approval, we've actually specified whether or not we would recommend it in the future so that there aren't any discussions like this and it's much more clear cut.
So this board voted 7-0 to recommend the approval of that plan to the zoning board. That's what the memo says. All right, Mr. Grady says all roadways are wide enough for emergency vehicle access.
We can't seem to have any objections. That mentioned zoning, I mean, water issues. and drainage.
Should have kept Mr. Daisy here.
Yeah. I thought he was gonna stay.
Should have.
I think he is staying. I think he was coming back for the ADU discussion.
Oh. One option would be to, if there's some piece of information that we wanted, we could always say that we, wanted to approve conditionally, if we wanted specific information from, our engineer. Anybody else, if we wanted any information from any more information or from DPW.
Well, I'm zoomed in on the plans and it appears there are 6 drainage, what do you call it, cisterns that the town would then have to maintenance on at a minimum. And as noted, the margins of the road would become public property, whether it's maintained by the homeowners association or not, the town would take responsibility for that ultimately. So these are, things that the select board will have to weigh. As far as just making a recommendation on it, I still feel that this is incredibly rushed and, that it would be a little bit irresponsible, you know, just go ahead and say, yes, yes, yes. Can we put conditions on it? Yeah, I suppose, I mean, if there was an evaluation that satisfied that it does actually meet the technical requirements for a road layout, public road layout. Then, yeah, I wouldn't have any objection, but I still have that assurance, right?
If we said if we've had, if Pat weighed in by Thursday, provided certain information, that can we do something like that?
If we could get them to, yeah. We get some, you know.
You know, I'm,
You still don't have the final say at the end of the day.
Right, right.
and, I mean, this board, at least as long as I've been involved, has been really disinclined to do this. That these are private developments. And they're private developments. This one is a private development that got developed in a way that's pursuant to state law, but which is otherwise outside our zoning. I'm quite frankly, personally, I'm especially given the DPW memo. I'm not required to recommend this, but I'm willing to defer to what anybody else wants to do.
Yes, please.
Why aren't you inclined?
Because I'll be candid with you, sir. I'll be candid with you, sir, because the DPW memo is very direct that they have issues with.
And what are the issues, specific issues?
If I may, through the chair,
Please, Jen, go ahead.
I'm speaking only for myself, but I agree with what Wayne is saying, and also, you know, making a recommendation to accept this petition as a public street with a 40B sets an interesting precedent. I don't know what kind of leverage we might have in the future for other 40Bs. There are several under construction right now. And I don't want to find ourselves in a situation where, you know, developers down the road say, well, the planning board said on January 27th, 2025, that they recommended this to the select board. You know, that's not a position I would want to be in.
Yeah, but are you saying that the town, that this board discourages 40B?
No.
Or it doesn't.
Then you don't encourage it, but you don't discourage it? I'm kind of confused.
Sure, right.
The issue is that the standard for street acceptance hadn't previously been specifically nailed down, and the procedure for doing that. And it's been done in a willy-nilly way. Only a couple of developments were specifically designed and laid out to meet or exceed the standards for a public way. And in that case, where in advance, the roadway and the development was laid out to meet or exceed the standards, so that we knew there would be no fire issues, we knew there would be no DPW issues. In those cases, it's a shoo-in. It's a no-brainer, but we don't have that here.
No, but
That just doesn't
it
exist
does
here.
meet those requirements.
We don't know that.
That's where we're struggling.
We
We
do
don't,
not-
it doesn't, it meets the road width does, but we don't have enough information. We
It's
feel like-
much more than road width. There are radii, you know, I mean, the maintenance, there's a bunch of stuff underneath that simple dimensional requirement. Yeah.
Because I actually went to the building inspector's office, and I went to them, and they said they had all the plans, and I just wanted to ensure that you folks in your decision process didn't need any additional information. So I'm kind of troubled. That was back in November when this was submitted. We're now in January. We're saying you haven't had enough time to ascertain that information.
This is the first time it's appeared on our agenda. This is the first that we're seeing it, unfortunately.
I personally don't have further questions of the applicant. I don't know how others do.
No, I don't.
disinclined, given the concerns raised by the DPW to recommend approval.
But the DPW, you said you were gonna mention what your concerns
I
are.
was looking, I was trying to pull it back up. on my
And
phone.
it was my understanding, it's obviously the maintenance of that, but every other public way has that same maintenance thing. So I guess what are the concerns that are different with this one versus other applications? I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to understand what the issues are.
I, through the chair, I'm happy to
Yeah,
answer
sure,
that.
go ahead, and I would like to add on that too.
Right, so, I understand that people look at everything that happened previously as some sort of precedent to what's gonna happen next. That isn't what happens in the land use context. That people make individual decisions on individual lots and individual properties. And quite frankly, I've heard over and over again, people say, well, you did this in 2018, so you gotta do it now. Quite frankly, we take applications one at a time. And to the extent that we think that they're appropriate, we rule on them. And so I can't tell you why we did McLean's Lay, why we did this other thing. All I can tell you is that there's been a view, at least collectively among this board, that we're not gonna take private ways as town ways because of the additional obligations on the town. You asked me specifically about the DPW. The DPW memo says, I'm still looking for as-built construction inspection logs and stormwater O&M plans. The DPW is hesitant to take on this additional responsibility. We have evaluated checkerboard circle and sunflower circle for snow plowing and found the road geometry to be less than ideal for plowing and stockpiling snow. We have concerns about landscape maintenance. This is a very direct statement from the DPW, which I'm willing to accept. That's just me.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we use to advise the select board that we are not recommending the acceptance of Checkmore Way as a public way.
I mean, do you motion in the affirmative and then vote against? So you would vote to recommend and then vote no.
Oh, okay.
Is that the?
No,
We don't have to move to the.
You can work on that.
Okay,
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, we don't have to move. We can just move to.
to not.
Yeah, no.
to. So I'm gonna restate it to say that I move that the planning board recommend to the select board that we not accept Checkmore Way as a public way, Checkmore Circle. Checkmore. Checkmore.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I see.
Do we have a motion on the floor? Do we have any discussion? We already done that.
And just for discussion, this is strictly a recommendation of our planning board to the select board. You'll still have a discussion from the select board and they can make a decision as to whether they want to move this to a meeting article.
It's gonna go to town meeting, hey.
Yeah.
It's gonna go to town meeting.
Okay, we'll call for a roll call vote, starting with Jen.
Jen Turcott, aye.
We are voting in the affirmative for Wayne's
Yeah.
negative recommendation, right? Yeah, Matthew Ray had.
Wayne, that's
Kristen Rath abstained.
Hi, Carpenter, I.
Rosemary, aye.
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Please. All right, next up, we have agenda item 2. This is with our town council. There's actually a couple of things I'd like to say before we jump into this. We're going to meet with town council Amy Wessel to discuss accessory dwelling unit ADU bylaw and Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority or MBTA community zoning. Before we dive into this, I'd like to provide a little context for everybody in the audience. As we know, the town voted down zoning to comply with the requirements of the MBTA Community Zoning Act in November special town meeting. This put the town out of compliance with the state. On January 8th, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, or SJC, published an opinion confirming that the MBTA Communities Law is constitutional and valid, and that the Attorney General has the power to enforce it. The court also opined that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, or EOHLC, must promulgate the laws implementing guidelines to the Administrative Procedures Act, which they had not done, if they are to be enforceable. The EOHLC has since filed emergency regulations with the Secretary of the Commonwealth and plans to adopt the emergency regulations as permanent regulations following a public comment period. The emergency regulations do not change substantive zoning requirements, effective determinations of compliance that have been issued by EOHLC, or require an additional actions from municipalities that have submitted district compliance applications that are currently under review. The MBTA communities that did not meet prior deadlines, such as Duxbury, will receive additional time to comply with the law, but must submit an action plan by February 13th, similar to the action plan that the town submitted in January of 2023. In order to comply with the emergency regulations, the town needs to have zoning which will allow multifamily housing in accordance with the emergency regulations enacted by July 14th. So the planning board is eager to further understand the implications of the SJC decision and its impact and expectations for the town of Duxbury. Tonight we'll use our time with town council to ask questions and have a discussion so that we can understand the new MBTA community zoning landscape. In light of this, we will not be taking questions or comments from the public. Once we have more information and begin to formulate a plan of action for the town, we would like to engage and include our fellow community members to help us to develop a zoning plan that meets the needs of Duxbury and which brings us into compliance with emergency regulations. Thank you, welcome.
Thank
The
you.
extent the town wants to be in compliance.
Yeah, yes, I was, yes, exactly. Well, I did the other part of our discussion. All right, Amy, the floor is yours.
What, would you like to start with MBTA or would you like to start with ADU?
Do you want me to start with well, I guess I sort of launched in the MBTA.
Sure.
Just doing start there.
So, you said everything that the Supreme Judicial Court, entered a decision or made a decision. There are three elements of the decision. The first was that, 3A is constitutional. The second is that the Attorney General can enforce the statute, pursuant to her general enforcement powers under Chapter 12, Section 10. And then the third is that the guidelines were not enforceable and need to be regulations. So, to go backwards, the guidelines, they have somewhat resolved that by issuing emergency regulations that are very, very similar to the guidelines. And they plan on implementing final regulations that will be very similar to the guidelines. The only difference is that the due dates. So we now have the interim compliance due on, with an action plan due on February 13th. And then you have to have zoning enacted by July 14th.
So Amy, what are we gonna do by February 13th?
It is, as far as what I've been told is it is not a lot of heavy lifting. It's the form that you had to fill out back in January.
Yeah.
By January 31st of 2023. So it's really just an updated form that you would find on the EOHLC website.
I think it basically is like the plan of like, here are all these different areas and we have further discussion. So
You do not have to choose your areas by
Right.
February 13th.
so is it possible we'll be able to kind of rinse and repeat? this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as far as I've been told, yes.
We can rinse and repeat the first one.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's what I've heard from consultants,
Yeah.
the engineers.
So I'm gonna ask a very direct question. We had a town meeting that made it extraordinarily clear that the proposal that had been made was unacceptable to the town.
Mhm.
And is it possible to just simply designate already densely developed areas with the expectation that they will not, in fact, receive any further development over the next 50 or 20 years?
You have to zone for multifamily development.
I didn't ask that.
So as long as your zoning allows for multifamily development, what's on the ground right now should not be the concern of HLC. So
So
HLC
the
is
answer to my
EO
question is
HLC.
yes.
So how many acres do you own? So yes, so in my opinion, that is my
In
interpretation.
fact, there are multiple towns in this Commonwealth who've done exactly that thing.
Yes, as far as I know, yes, correct.
Town of Braintree designated parking lots out in front of Grossman's Plaza.
And then there have been towns that have received the okay from HLC to place it over 40 Rs and 40 Bs.
And we've. So my question is this. If we were trying to express the desire of the town as really clearly expressed during the town meeting, but at the same time, try to bring ourselves into compliance with state law and not lose funding, there is in fact a way to do this that would not result in the imminent construction of multifamily housing.
Correct. I do think though that, I do think it's important to note that I was at your town meeting. Town meeting never actually got into your overlays. It was never even discussed. And I do think that you probably had one overlay that probably would have passed.
Yep.
So I don't think you have to start from the very beginning. But again, that would be up to the planning board. So it seemed like there were several different reasons. My takeaways from town meeting were a couple things. One, I feel like people weren't educated. We didn't do a very good job. The town didn't do a very good job. So people walked in with a lot of misinformation. I felt like people stepped up to the microphone and I was like, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. So I think that's a challenge, one right there for anything that we choose to do going forward, is to somehow engage the public and include the community somehow in our discussion and get their feedback and what the visions that they'd like, as well as what we may choose to do here. The second thing is that, the first was getting information out. The second is hesitancy for change. I think that's a challenge we just have to overcome. But the third is we were maybe putting everything, all the eggs in one basket. If we were to parcel out and have set aside different places in town, would we still be able to see, this might be Stephen Tax, might be a question for you. If we identified the smaller lots in town and are able to distribute more smaller areas in zoning, would we be able to comply with?
Yeah, technically, we have met the minimum single 25 acre with the Creek area, so we can put the rest of it in any divisions we wish to pursue. And just from memory, in terms of Wayne's comment, you know, from what we've looked at, if, for example, the property that's adjacent to Bonji's, the village of Duxbury, which contains over 200 units, was to be overlay zoned, and then the apartment buildings on South Street, which is another 7 or 8 acres, that would do it right there.
And would result in almost no change in what people would see in town for the next 15 years.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the South Street apartments are perhaps showing their age and might
Right.
be amenable to redevelopment at a higher.
Yeah.
Scale, so.
But it seemed to me that at least reading the tea leaves, that we could come to a resolution here that complied with state law, but ultimately resulted in nothing.
Reduced our risk, let's put it that way.
So there's that philosophy, right? We just want to comply, but we also have a housing issue. Like,
That's right.
Is there some way that we can, that our community would embrace this idea of some multifamily housing or zoning for multifamily housing that would allow some additional options? Because right now we're zoned for 1 acre lots, we hear from people all the time. Not everybody wants a 1 acre house. They love this house, they raise their family here, but they want some other options. So is there a way to achieve both?
I've been told that there is. The sticking point seems to be the number, the 15 unit per acre number. I've been told that it is possible to conjure and envision, cottage style, relatively freestanding, multifamily structures that achieve 15 units per acre density. I have not seen it. So it's bespoke, but not in evidence. And therefore, my question to you, Amy, is in your work with other towns, obviously you're involved in many municipalities. Have there been zoning proposals essentially negotiated with the OHLC where they acknowledge that the 15 units per acre is in fact incompatible with an existing milieu, and they've made arrangements for all over this?
Not in one.
Well, there's also different context now from when we had this original town meeting where it was pretty resounding as to how the town felt. The SJC is ruled. If we choose as a town to reject it again, then there could be forced compliance. Right? I mean, the AG can come in and now force the town to comply with the statute. At least that's my kind of reading.
So, so that actually would be my second point, which is how would the AG enforce under chapter 12, section 10. She has these plenary powers to enforce. We have thought about this considerably at our firm. And it's our opinion right now that what would happen is that the Attorney General would sue the town, seeking to have the town enact zoning. If the town does not enact zoning, the town would then be in contempt of court, which would be a fine, a significant fine. So, there's been others that feel that, that the AG, so when the AG first filed her lawsuit against Milton, she had asked for a master to come in and to implement the zoning, and then at one point had asked that the court actually enact the zoning. I truly don't think that could happen because 48 section 5 requires town meeting to enact zoning. So I don't necessarily think those two things would happen, at least not right now, but the powers under, the decision made it very clear. The SJC made it very clear that her powers under 12 section 10 were very broad.
Yeah, it seems like the more likely scenario could be financial repercussions instead of forced overlay, but
We don't know.
But it hasn't been decided.
Exactly, we
Yeah.
don't know that.
Yeah. And I do think that's part of the messaging as we get on into this new round of this.
So you are correct, your town meeting did not have the benefit of the SJC decision.
Right.
And town meeting unfortunately had a letter from EOHLC that was, sent at 5:17. Which was extremely harmful to town meeting, it caused a lot of confusion.
And what's also harmful? Where you say, hey, there's a lot of uncertainty about this. Can we have a little more time once the uncertainty is resolved to figure this out? And they've just been told, no, you can't figure this out. You had way more than enough time. That was unhelpful.
Yes, agreed.
Well, and I think that's a challenge now, right? Here we are, we have till July, so like, do we sit around and wait till May? I don't think that's gonna do us any favors, so like, let's. Figure out a plan, how do we want to proceed, what do we want to do? I think
Sure.
it's really,
To your point,
Yeah.
Kristen, I think there's two approaches here,
Yeah.
right? There's one area that we identified, or the board, or the working group identified with Island Creek, right, where I don't think you'll get a lot of pushback in town. Is the objective to meet just to comply and avoid any financial or other potential repercussions from the state AG? Or is it to actually pass something that encourages some sort of multifamily development? And I think that's a decision we may not make tonight, but we're gonna have to make a decision which way we go. If it's the former, Stephen, and that, was there capacity at just Island Creek to get us in full compliance? I don't think there was, right? There was not enough capacity at Island Creek. Was it due to a height restriction on the zoning, or is it due to an acreage? Yeah, okay.
just refresh us, what were the requirements again?
There has to be one area of 25 acres or more and a total of 50 acres.
So I like
Or more.
this,
I think it's about 27, I believe.
so then we have another 33-ish. 23-ish. Sorry.
Yeah, I fully, that's right, that's the question, whether we're gonna actually try to encourage housing or whether we're just gonna try to get to compliance.
Well, and it's a numbers game fundamentally. I think that in terms of the go forward, just sort of strategy here, I guess. I think that you're correct in that the default stance ought to be that we identify the existing density parcels and just acknowledge that those are our multifamily zones today. And then the question becomes, are there any additional parcels or areas of town where it would be appropriate to rezone? Or overlays?
Which is perfect, because what I was gonna say is I think we should do both. I think, quite frankly, my view was that we should get base level compliance. And then think hard and long about how to encourage multifamily housing in this town. But the resistance to this particular law, because it's perceived as a direction from on high, it was pretty high.
Yes, that was the other thing I asked, so we're not happy.
Yeah, but
So Amy, any thoughts or suggestions, considering from where you are, looking at us, or with the things we're kind of grappling with, what other towns are grappling with, any suggestions?
Get into compliance.
Okay.
I have been told by the Attorney General's office that, that enforcement will be swift.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you said that about the powers, because I don't know if anybody saw Boston Globe article today about firefighters that the state, state has said, we'll take away your grants. Well, the fire that they're looking at now denying fire departments some grants. Our chief is great about getting grants every single year.
like,
Amy, have you seen any grant refusals now during this temporary reprieve that towns that decided no are in?
No, I'm not. However, don't forget that they did take money away from Milton. So they actually took $144,000 away from Milton.
Okay.
That is the only one that I
what
know
happened in Holden?
that they actually, that's still going. That's the appeals court.
Yeah,
They have no, they have,
I know.
that's gonna go away because they don't have stand-in. But if,
In all candor, Amy and I are. Gonna say that.
Okay.
I think I won. No, I'm just-
I know you. I also know I didn't argue.
But there are, one thing that, so I have, I speak with the Attorney General's office all the time, and I speak with the OHLC on this, on MBTA communities and on ADUs. But, and they have both indicated that they are more than willing to work with cities and towns that are not in compliance. To get municipalities into compliance, so.
EHOLC said that.
Yes, and so did the AG's office, so they're willing to look at any draft bylaws that you have, any modeling that you have, anything like that, they'll do pre-certification reviews, things like that, again, so.
And they'll give it to us like 8 minutes before the town meeting.
Hopefully that does not ever happen again, that was outrageous, and I did express my opinion about that to HLC.
Okay, good.
So,
It would have been better.
Well,
not
if
to.
I could ask a
I-
specific question.
I agree.
Are we still in that circumstance where they're saying we would like 90 days to review your before?
I think that they are saying that, however, I don't know, I'm not sure if there's any community out there that can do that. I do know of one of my communities that, they indefinitely postponed at the fall special town meeting, which was in October. So they have been working on a new overlay, on 2 new overlay areas since October. They probably can get in with the 90 days, but others, it's not gonna be as easy.
So if we need town approval, we've got a town meeting in March, and would this mean that we would have to have a special town meeting like in May or June? Yes.
I think I think the warrant might have closed.
It did.
No.
Yeah. January.
For March.
Yeah.
Yes, so then for May, June, what is the timing? Can you help us figure out the timing?
I can count it backwards for you,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll work with Rainey on that.
Okay.
I do have a question, if you don't mind me, I can't find the completed application.
Okay.
So, look around now. No, I've looked like more than once and I can't find it, I did find a copy of our old one from 23 and I.
You mean the one that has to be filed in February? Oh, it should be there, yeah.
The link to it,
Okay.
I've looked, I don't know, has anybody else been on there and looked? Steve, did you try
I'm sorry,
to look for the pre-adoption application?
I did try to look for it, Yeah.
I don't think it's on there.
yeah, I didn't see it.
I'll think back, I'll have to think back because I think somebody actually already filed it.
Okay,
I think it might have been Norton, so I'll check with Paul. And-
okay, yeah, just before I emailed the OHLC, I just
yeah,
wanna make
I'll
sure
check.
that I wasn't missing
Yeah,
something, I've
okay.
looked multiple times, so.
Okay, okay,
Thank you,
should be on there.
I can fill that out if you guys want, just based off the
I mean-
old one,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we want that.
yeah, yes, please.
yeah,
Because we gotta do
yeah,
it in 2 weeks.
Right.
as soon as I figure out where it is.
Yeah.
Well, this goes to an active topic of discussion that we've had in terms of your availability to move things forward and our availability to support you in that and how we can work together to just make sure this gets done and we don't find ourselves back up against the wall again.
Yeah, I'm aware of the dates and the deadlines, and I did plan on speaking to Brady about a special town meeting, but I wanted to wait and see what the temperature was in the room tonight before I proceeded with that.
Because the thing that was, I think, very disturbing about the last time is that we kicked this can too far down the road. And then we had people absolutely bust their backsides and did an enormous amount in a short period of time. And I think that that's too much to ask of volunteers. And you should just try to get this done in a way that A, gives us enough time to do it, and B, gives us enough time to explain.
Yeah, well, that's literally the point.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of like getting work done. It's a matter of the town absorbing that work.
Right.
Because,
Well, I think you're gonna have a problem with social media anyways. There's so misinformation out there. No matter how strong, I mean, let's be clear that the working group did a fantastic job.
I agree with that.
And there was still an abundant amount of misinformation out there. I think that's, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. I can foresee, Amy, that people in town saying, well, these are just emergency regulations that are subject to a comment period, so we don't really know what's gonna happen, but the truth of it being. These emergency regulations are going to be passed after the comment period, and they're going to be then enforceable.
Correct.
And almost identical to what was original with that.
Yes, and I can almost, well, I asked and I was told that the Attorney General's office did do significant research with regard to their ability for EOHLC's ability to issue emergency regulations. And there is a housing crisis, which is a public health crisis, so they are allowed to issue emergency regulations. The other issue that I've been hearing about a lot is there a 2-year ban? Because Duxbury actually voted no at town meeting, whereas some other of my communities just indefinitely postponed. But Duxbury, it was a clear no vote. And does that mean under 48 section 5 that you are forbidden to bring it back to town meeting within the next 2 years? And that is not the case, because in Duxbury, the planning board gave a favorable recommendation. So there is a case, the Penn case, the Penn versus the town of Barnstable case, which says that as long as the first recommendation from the planning board was favorable, you can bring it back. The second, obviously, to bring it back, the second recommendation should also be favorable. But as long as your first recommendation was favorable, it can come back. So there is no 2-year ban. I did look into that for you, so that is all set.
Regulations might be actually become official.
Probably, I would say by the beginning of March. So the comment period is from, I think it's July 31st to I think it's the end of February. And then once they issue they would probably take a couple weeks to issue final regulations. And then they have to be, they do not become absolutely final until they are they are put into the register. And the register does not come out, I think it comes out bi-weekly. So, for example, the ADU regulations will be final on July 31st, because that's when the register comes out.
I have a question about, since we're on the topic of the emergency regulations, I understand there will be a required public hearing.
Yes,
And what, if anything, could transpire at that public hearing, which would alter the trajectory of this or any particulars?
so I participated in the public hearing for the ADUs. We, KP Law submitted a 4-page single space memo about the ADU regulations, and then I was at the public hearing. We have 3 minutes to talk. However, I do want to say that I was encouraged by the red line changes to the draft ADU regulations. However, that being said, I do not expect significant changes to the MBTA regulations, because the regulations, they turned the guidelines into regulations, and those guidelines and regulations are extremely, they're extremely scientific. I mean, you guys know that, they have to do with areas and the modeling, and I mean, there are certain things like excluded land. That's not, I don't see that changing at all. I don't see comments. I see people saying that comments being that EOHLC came up with the numbers for each community are way too high. The units that you have to zone for a certain amount of units. And I see the comments being that they're too high, but I don't see that changing.
Yeah.
It was a formula, so.
Well,
But
so
I
I'd
don't
like to
know.
just, if I could engage with this for a moment, my main complaint about the interpretation and the rendering of the guidelines, which are now being transformed into regulation, is that they chose to apply the applicable modifier to only 2 out of the 3 criteria. Everything was wished away except for the 15 unit density. And this in Duxbury is against the public interest. It is actually working against adoption of this. So I believe there is an argument to be made that
There
that should
is.
also be fungible in this respect. If we had more landed area at a lower density, we could meet the requirement or the desire for production of housing without violating the standards of the community. Can we make that argument effectively?
I mean, you can make that argument. I don't see it going anywhere with EOHLC. I really don't. One of the things I think they're gonna consider is the fact that other communities have done it.
Of course. Well, and I look at those
And that
communities and they already have. a lot
That's
of
gonna
high
go,
density,
that's
so
gonna
it's
go
not a-
against.
It's not an uncomfortable increment
Mhm,
for them. It's the intensity of the change that I'm trying to.
mhm, Yeah, no,
realize.
I think it's a concern. It is a valid concern, but I don't see them doing it.
Thank you.
Is there a difference, just for refreshing, is there a difference in the number of units for towns that actually have an MBTA station as opposed to a neighboring town?
No,
Same.
so adjacent communities.
Adjacent, yes, sorry.
And MBTA and commuter rail, whatever it is, those would be the same. There's another category, which is small town adjacent communities.
Okay, we don't need the small
No.
town, but we were adjacent. I was just wondering if there's any consideration, but because it does feel like one size fits all zoning. And it's one thing if you're Brookline, Brookline, or if you're Quincy, or you had that development already, or some place like Duxbury doesn't. And sure, other towns have agreed to it, but other towns haven't. Because people, so if we could somehow modify, just reduce the number of units, that would be tremendously, the number of units per acre, that would be tremendously helpful. Do you see any way to creating an argument for that?
I don't. Unfortunately. There are arguments to be made, don't
Yes.
get me wrong,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't see them being, I don't see EOHLC making.
Just any way to sway them.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
So you're also going to talk about the ADU?
Well, before we, can I just,
Hold on.
I'm gonna just cut right to the brass tacks here. It's very clear to me that at the point of town meeting and voting on that work of the committee, that we had a loaf that was half baked. It needed more work, right? So how do we get that work done in time that we have? That's the challenge I see before us, and you were materially involved, Rebecca, there's a collaboration between either a working group or this board, our legal counsel and our planner, that needs to be executed efficiently and without fuss. So how do we set that in motion as soon as possible?
So will you be looking at a consultant again?
I think we would.
Really, those were just real quick.
I asked Stan Tech to provide us with another quote. I will say, I don't know if they want to work with us again.
Is there another consultant that, I mean, is there?
Yeah, there are others, but that was just who I went to
Okay,
first
sure, sure, sure.
because they created
Yeah, they went
all
through.
of the models and everything. And now they didn't say no, but I was told that they needed to ask and see.
So why wouldn't they want to work with us again?
They went way over budget. It went way over budget,
Oh,
you know, because of how long it took for Duxbury to execute.
and they also split into companies in the middle of the project, so there's a lot of excess costs.
I'm not saying one's right, this is just what I.
Yeah, it just happened.
I'm just,
There was also one of the comments from HLC from the pre-application review was an issue,
yes,
was a technical issue.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen again,
correct.
so.
You mean,
I don't think it would be that hard for another consultant to pick up, because I have the modeling books, I have them send me all of their information. So, I mean, and another consultant that has maybe had success in other communities, we could ask them for a quote. The other issue is funding, there is no funding for another consultant. So I have to speak to Rady about that as well.
is that something that EHOLC would be willing to help?
You can look at, you can talk to them about grant money. I know towns have gotten grants from.
That's helpful.
And the other thing for Rebecca, maybe looking at consultants would be somebody who's had success, or a group that's had success, but also is able, has some experience with outreach.
Right, I agree with that, yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, we need that. And then we're still waiting on DLTA to submit the application for funding for a feasibility study. Because I know that the public is really looking for that, so it would be nice if that all of that was done concurrently as we move through the process.
So to talk about timing, so if we think about, we want to move as quickly as possible, but it makes sense to try to have some pieces in place by our next meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe do we call back the MBTA communities group to start, do we reach out to the community, ask other people, be like, we don't need.
I think we need a timeline first.
Yes.
We need a timeline of when a potential special town meeting can happen. We need a plan for a consultant. And then we could probably go from there.
We do need a timeline. And
We need a timeline.
I'm very strongly supportive of the notion that we take the knowledge that we've already gleaned as to what areas are already densely developed and are unlikely to be developed in the near term, come up with 50 acres of it and be done with this. In the language.
So I will set up a meeting with Rainey. I didn't want to make assumptions because of what happened at town meeting. I wanted to wait for this meeting to happen. So if you're definitely want to have another go at it and you want to comply, which is what I'm gathering, then I will schedule a meeting with Rainey and we will come up with a timeline.
There's a preference to comply.
There's also a little bit of a Band-Aid.
Looking wishy-washy doesn't look good to your residents.
Hey, I just want to ask Jen, is there anything you want to weigh in on? Sometimes when you're on the wall, it's hard to recognize if you're raising your hand or contribute anything.
I'm good. No, I'm just actively listening, and if I will speak up if I need to add. It's been a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Good to move on. Any other questions for Rebecca? Rebecca, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, and per our email, we can keep MBTA on our agenda moving forward as we work through. So your preference.
Okay, one question for rating / the select board is whether or not the MBTA communities group is still in effect.
Okay, I believe it is, but I will double check on you.
Steve Gann, 265 West Street. I know you didn't want comments from the public, but I'm kind of straddling two worlds here. The select board has engaged us as a working group for an indefinite period. They have not put a termination on our engagement, so technically we still exist. We consider our work for what we're engaged to do to be completed. We would be looking for a new charge and revised guidance with respect to our application.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, next up, ADUs.
Okay, so ADUs pursuant to the Affordable Homes Act, and I think it was November 6th, the governor signed into law the Affordable Homes Act. So there's sections 7 and 8, which pertain to affordable pertain to accessory dwelling units. And except one accessory dwelling unit is allowed by right in any zoning district that allows for single family homes by right or by special permit. And so the ADU is either half the size of the house or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. Which means that an ADU, it is called, under the regulations, it's called a protected use ADU. And so a protected use ADU cannot be larger than 900 square feet. There can be no owner occupancy requirements, there can be no affordability requirements. And then there was I'm talking just about the actual statute, the act. In the act, it said that you can forbid them from being rented on a short-term rental basis.
But you can't forbid rental.
Correct.
You can only forbid short-term.
Correct, exactly. And then regulations came out, draft regulations came out by EOHLC, which were, in my opinion, needed quite a bit of work. The draft regulations, we were not very pleased with the draft regulations. So we submitted, as I said, 4-page single space memo to HLC with all the things that we thought were problems. And we participated in the public hearing. We've been a very big part of these ADU. We're working with the Attorney General's office, working with the EOHLC on this. And the final regulations were released last week. They released them in a final form and in a red line form. So they took their draft regulations and they showed the changes that they made based on the public hearing. And those regulations will go into effect on Thursday, or the 31st. That's Thursday or Friday, I don't even know. Friday, thank you. So those will go into effect on Friday. In the regulations, they have added a couple of more layers of regulations to ADUs, to these protected use ADUs. For example, they state that the protected use ADUs cannot be regulated more stringently than a single family house is regulated. So a lot of, as you know, a lot of accessory dwelling unit bylaws currently say things like a detached ADU must reflect the nature of the single family dwelling. If you can't dictate how a single family house is going to look, you can't dictate how an ADU is going to look. They also have provided that a protected use ADU may be on a non-conforming lot or attached to a non-conforming dwelling. In my opinion, they've overreached in that capacity because 40A Section 6 regulates non-conforming structures and non-conforming lots, and regulations cannot usurp statutes. And so I think that they are flat out wrong in that aspect. But that will go into effect and that will have to be challenged, and a court will then have to determine if I'm right or EOHLC is right. So it's just my opinion.
So how do you deal with lot coverage issues?
So lot coverage issue, that is an issue. Lot coverage is an issue, not just for Duxbury, but for other cities and towns that have a low lot coverage. And essentially, I think that the question is going to be, is the lot coverage reasonable to allow for a protected use ADU? And I think for one protected use ADU, you would have to allow you would have to allow an expansion of lot coverage.
Beyond 15%.
Yes.
for one 900 square foot
Yes,
ADU.
yes.
Or would that take the form of a variance?
So that is an excellent question. Because now we're kind of into a scenario, we're into a telecom scenario where a cell tower has to get relief from the zoning bylaw, but that relief cannot be denied. And so, but the problem that we have is that cell tower,
That's
that-
federal law.
and that's based on case law. That really came down, case law said, yes, you still need relief, but you can't deny the relief. We don't have that case law yet. We also don't have the federal law, as Wayne said. So it's a question. One thing that could be done would be to, in your zoning bylaw, that you allow for an increase in lot coverage to allow for only the protected use ADU.
So that makes sense to me, right? But so. The problem is, if you've got a non-conforming lot.
Yeah.
That's already non-conforming as to lot coverage,
Correct.
and there are tons of them in Duxbury.
Yeah.
You just get to throw in another 900 square feet on, as of right?
In my opinion, you should have to go to the ZBA, you should have to get a finding
Yeah.
from the ZBA to increase that nonconformity, alter, change, or increase that nonconformity. The ZBA, in my opinion, still has the authority to look around the neighborhood and say, no, there's no other lots in this neighborhood that already exceed the lot coverage and want to increase the lot coverage. And that is a finding, as you know, under 48, section 6, that's what the finding is. Is it, is this increase going to be more detrimental to the neighborhood? But the way that this draft regulations are written, it seems to me that HLC seems to think that no matter what, you have to allow for one protected use ADU.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes, it was one of our comments that was ignored.
Well, that will be litigated.
Yeah.
I think so.
So the other thing about this law that nobody pays any attention to, but which I think is gonna have a real impact. Is that formerly compliant lots that would have merged pursuant to the merger rules are now fair game to build again. That if you had a non-compliant, or you had a compliant lot
Mhm,
that was compliant at one time
mhm.
and is now merged with another lot, that merger no longer exists and you can still build on the formerly compliant lot. They
Well, I
got
don't
rid of the merger rule.
I don't know that the merger no longer exists.
I think it's that's what it says in the statute.
Well, if you have the 10,000 square feet and the 75. You mean
Right.
section 10 of the Affordable Homes Act with the new merger?
Right,
Yes, that also,
so there are gonna be a lot, there are gonna be developers who are smart about this and understand that lots of non-conforming lots that had previously
yes,
merged are now conforming because they were previously conforming.
correct, and they also would be allowed to have an ADU.
Yes, I know.
Can you guys just stop, what do you mean by a merged lot? Can you just step back and put it in like?
So if you had a lot that, our zoning now is about 40,000 square feet, right?
Right.
And you needed 200 feet on
Right.
a public road.
Right.
But that wasn't always the rule,
Right,
right?
like look at Wadsworth. for
Right,
example.
so if you had a lot that complied with the old zoning rules. And you actually owned the land next door. Those lots merged in such a way that you couldn't build on, you no longer had two lots that were buildable.
Right.
Under the ADU law,
Or under the Affordable Homes Act.
right. You're going to now have two lots again.
Provided one is 10,000 square feet and 75 feet of frontage.
Okay.
And it can be buildable, but the question there, the provision there is that you can only build a house, a single family house that is 1850 that is a maximum of 1,850 square feet and must have 3 bedrooms.
Right.
And then it becomes a single family dwelling, so I think you could add a protected ADU to that lot also.
Yeah, I just think that this is gonna resuscitate lots that people have.
Oh, definitely, I already
and-
have, I have at least four different proposals that I have to look at for building commissioners throughout our cities and towns, where developers have come in and said, we're demerging these.
Right,
And so we have to go back and make sure at one point these lots were buildable,
they were
and they
conforming.
were conforming at one
some
point, yep, and
I can tell you, Wayne, as a real estate attorney, commercial, I have developer clients who already based this on this.
Yeah, what,
I mean, it's coming down the pipe.
yeah, it has,
So you take that one merge, so you had 2 half-acre lots, and it becomes one merge, so do you already have 2 houses on them?
oh, then you're all done.
you're all done.
Alright, so let's say what, you had a house and an empty lot.
Yeah.
And you've got 1 acre lot.
Yeah.
So then how do you unmerge it with the ADU?
It's with the Affordable Homes Act.
Oh.
The ADU is part of the Affordable Homes Act.
Right, the ADU is part
The
of-
section 10 provides for this merger, this new merger provision, which the purpose of it was to encourage starter homes. So starter homes is another way to, to increase housing in Massachusetts, and it's these smaller houses, but have to have 3 bedrooms.
But
Yeah.
but there are gonna be opportunities for development.
There's also another wrinkle to that, which is that under the existing separate lot protection, which is 5,000 square feet, 50 feet of frontage, the lot has to be vacant. However, in this section 10 of the Affordable Homes Act, it doesn't say that the lot has to be vacant. So you could have a lot that has a house on lot B, on lot A, and a garage on lot B. And all of a sudden they could separate those lots because it doesn't say it has to be. So you'll have houses that you're looking at that house and they have a house and a yard. And you think it's all one lot, but actually, when you go back, it's 2 lots. And they could now build where their yard is, if they wanted to.
Alright, so what do we as a board, so we wanted to eventually to work on this as for ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, for Duxbury, so what kind of information do you need from us? Do we need to talk about parking, like
So
setbacks?
I submitted, what I did was I took your existing bylaw. And I redlined it, because, just so you know that. I did this prior to the new regulations coming out, so. Some of my comments no longer matter because they did listen to us on some things. So in the yellow, when it says in Duxbury, this would be all zoning districts, that still applies because the way that your zoning goes is that it starts, single family is allowed in every zoning district and you kind of move up. Or you get more narrow, I should say. So yes, so what I'm looking for you are over, just the general questions, which is, do you want to allow for short-term rentals of ADUs?
I think the answer to that is gonna be resoundingly no at town meeting.
Yeah.
But we've got you need a regulation in place in order to get rid of it.
I think that the town will say, no, we don't want ADUs.
No, they're gonna say, no, we don't want short-term
Oh,
rentals.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
And that could be in this section of the zoning, of your zoning bylaw, by stating, the unit, the protected use ADU may not be rented, on a short-term basis pursuant to, GL chapter 64G, which defines short-term rentals.
And what do you think the appetite is for the town?
Is-
Less than a month, over a month?
Well, that's where I was gonna go, Kristen, is there a timeframe that would?
Yes, so
Okay.
under 64G, the definition of short-term rental does not indicate a days or a time period. However, the definition of occupancy is 30 days or less. So if you combine the two, you come up with 30 days or less would be the term.
Because in town on solid grounds, it's a 90-day minimum lease or something like that.
Yes, you can. You have to allow them to be rented. So we do have a lot of cities and town, or a lot of towns, I'm sorry, on the Cape that are looking for a year. rentals, but 12 month because they're trying to get year-round rentals.
So the problem from a planning perspective, in my mind, is that there are places along the beach, especially in the northern part of Duxbury, where people rent their houses on a week-to-week basis during the summer. And if we do what I just proposed we do, we just made all that in.
For ADUs, for a protected use ADU, so that's your 900 square foot ADU cannot be rented on a short-term basis.
Okay,
Duxbury's short-term rental issues are, that does not.
it's a
end
broader
this.
issue,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
right.
Okay.
It won't end that issue, but for your protected use ADUs, you can say those cannot be rented less than 30 days at a time, or whatever.
Would that also then apply to the potential for additional ADUs where ZBA could grant those
Yes.
special permits and then might also be restricted from short-term?
Correct. And then, the other thing that we're seeing, is that, some municipalities want to allow for, additional ADUs of a larger size. And so, in our opinion, you can do that. The sizes that we've seen are up to 1,500 square feet and up to 1,200 square feet. And that would be by special permit. And that would, but that would also mean that you could have a property that would have a single family house, a 900 square foot ADU, and then a 1,500 square foot ADU. So you are looking at, 3 dwelling units on the property, if you go that route. Because you have to allow the protected use ADU.
Not to complicate things, but to add to Wayne's point, are we able to create an overlay district where we define the different short-term rental periods if we were down in an area that with the ADUs may be rented on a week-to-week basis, but in other areas of the town, the ADUs are more of a 6-month or an annual lease?
I think that would violate the uniformity provision of 48 section 4 to allow for, because you're talking about the use is the protected use ADU, that's the use. So you're saying some of that use, some of those uses in certain areas can be handled one way, but in other areas a different way. I don't think that would fly with the uniformity provision. And I've never seen it done where, single family houses can be, well, the other problem is that zoning is not supposed to regulate ownership. But the statute specifically says you can forbid short-term rentals.
Can you do an overlay, just as a sidebar, can you do an overlay with single family homes? You say in northern Duxbury, yes, you can have short-term rentals, week-long rentals. but-
Oh, sure, if you're talking about short-term rentals, you
Yes.
could say that in certain areas, you can have short-term rentals in certain areas.
Mhm.
That's fine,
Okay,
because that is the use, is the short-term rental.
okay,
is the
so we
use.
could apply that to ADUs then?
No,
that's what
because.
you were saying, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, yeah.
So, yes, that's why I got confused.
But if you wanted to say short-term rentals are allowed in a certain area in Duxbury, you could do that. The problem that you're gonna run into is the ADUs, if you're gonna forbid them. Yeah,
Okay, so the ADUs can get restricted there.
Switching gears a little bit, I know I looked at the, I'm not sure it was guidelines or regulations at this point, but there was the information put out about unreasonable regulation. Now, Duxbury has, and I just looked this up because of the other subdivision we just looked at, a standard whereby a multifamily home requires a 2-inch water main. And wouldn't an ADU and a single family home, especially if we're in the same structure, be a multifamily?
so not necessarily, because are they gonna have separate utilities or are they gonna have the same utilities? That is a question.
Right, can a single family home 1-inch water main support a secondary home? That's the fundamental physics question I want to ask my building inspector, but I want to run a legal
Okay.
question by you
Yeah,
first. What if Duxbury were to say, this is a more intensive use? Our regulations already require an upgraded water main for a more intensive use. And therefore, your protected ADU mandates or requires in the zoning that the water main standard.
that would be in that would be, the zoning can require that.
Well, just today, that's why.
That's what, yeah, but is that in the zoning?
Yeah.
The water, a water main size is in your zoning bylaw?
Family use. So
Hmm.
triggers.
I'm not sure how zoning can control utilities.
Well, me, I mean.
Yeah.
Exactly correct. It can't.
Okay,
And we're doing.
okay, I'll have to look at that.
Seems
But,
to me the big issue with based on the ADUs is short-term rental issue. From the planning board perspective.
Maybe like where it sits on the property too.
Yeah, right, where it's cited, but on the uniformity question, are we better off attacking the short-term rental definition regardless and not differentiate between ADUs and single-family homes? But instead differentiating areas of town, would that not violate the uniformity?
probably wouldn't.
Right, do we want to take that approach? Do we hit ADUs for certain areas of town? We know that. Basis, and then other areas of town, of short-term rentals are 6 months or 12 months, regardless of the structure.
I just think from a adoption and town meeting perspective, if what we're doing is simply proposing that there are gonna be no short-term rentals less than 30 days of ADUs, we'll get all kinds of support for that. If you start proposing, there are some places in town where you can legally do short-term rentals, you're gonna get a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
It's a separate question, and I appreciate your pointing out that they're interlocking to some degree, so it seems clear that we need to deal with ADU. Stand alone, get that in place, and then figure out the implications of a proposal to support legal children as a separate.
So what's our homework here?
So what I would like to propose is that I have Jim's comments that I got from Rebecca. And that I incorporate Jim's comments and then I also revise my own comments to meet the existing regulations, not the draft regulations. Because they changed. So, and then I could submit a new version to you guys. And then I think you need to have a meeting that Jim can come to.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then just in terms of reading this, and you probably handled this anyway, but I just want to request that the general term ADU essentially never be used freestanding, it has to be qualified. Are we talking about a protected use ADU?
Right,
Are
and
we
that's what
talking about-
I will,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'll change. Yeah, I'll definitely change the protected
PADU.
use, the protected use
UAD.
ADU. And then the other one is,
Wow.
special permit ADU or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's no problem.
because Jim brings up the legacy issue.
Yes.
Yes, it's great.
Realm.
Yeah.
You might have. I mean, yeah, that would be great. We can review that, we do it later point. Anybody else have any comments for?
There was a little detail that mentioned in the regulations, and I don't know whether we need to address it in bylaw or not, it had to do with addressing. The address,
Oh, yes, yes.
and they said that there's a Mass GIS standard
Yeah,
for this.
yeah.
And I don't know that Duxbury is already in compliance with the Mass GIS.
Well,
standard,
you guys
so-
don't regulate, you guys don't, there are zoning bylaws that, they provide that an ADU has to have a half of an address or something, and that's what they're trying to get away from.
Us.
You guys don't have that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would be like, 171 and a half, yeah. Yeah, or 171A or 171B, whatever it is, they don't like those. And that also has to, that is also something that would be, your fire department would have to, because of public safety, they need to know where to go, and your assessors would need to weigh in on all that, so. But yeah,
The warrant's closed for the town meeting in March, yes. So is the short-term short-term rental issue on the warrant for March, or it's not? So we are potentially, when this law goes into effect, are going to have a period of time between the next town meeting.
If people put up ADUs in the entries.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I recall, I think in November had told us that if the town meeting essentially stated its intention to pass regulation, it was considered to be in effect. But now is it not possible for us to do that?
you would have to wait until after your town meeting, and immediately after town meeting, you could have your public hearing, your 48 section 5 public hearing with your new bylaw. And then that would
That would serve as a
Freeze it.
placeholder
Yeah.
to prevent any mischief until we pass the law.
Yeah.
All right, well, I suggest we need to do that.
Unless
Sorry,
unless,
I'm trying to remember.
the only other thing would be is if the town is planning on having a special within the annual, in March, we might be able to get this on the special within the annual. We'd have to find out. I know, you guys have a lot going on in March, I know that, at town meeting, so this could be something that it might be better to do it in the same special you're gonna do your.
They're gonna have to put some more seats in the back.
Yeah, you know, there was a town, on the Cape that did they went back and looked at their permits granted for ADUs throughout the years, and honestly, it was less than 10 a year that were building permits that were pulled. And then the other thing to remember is that these aren't inexpensive to put up, so I don't expect, but again, I've been wrong before, but I don't expect a line at the building commissioner's desk on February 2nd, or February 3rd. February 2nd is Sunday.
Jim actually said that.
Yeah, they're close to $300,000 to put one up, so.
I just don't understand why there isn't gonna be an immediate market for prefabs.
Yeah, there probably will.
Right, where
It's still a lot of effort, though.
It is.
there's some effort, but the notion of just a 900 square foot prefab
Yeah.
that complies with all the building codes.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that there's not gonna be, people out there doing that. I already proposed it to someone.
Rebecca, could you kind of work backwards from like if we wanted to do after the town meeting, if we wanted to propose the bylaw within here, so we kind of have a holding place. We do that. Maybe.
Are you talking about to have your public hearing here
Yes.
for the ED, or are you talking about the special? It would be the same timeline as MBTA.
Yeah, it would be, if you're gonna go, if you're gonna use that stuff.
I think you'd have to put it in the same.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
We're having.
I'm understanding that correctly. right?
Okay, yeah.
You have to have it at the.
Yeah,
That's
that's.
the special.
I unfortunately have a 9 o'clock thing. I have to get to.
It's nice to see you. Liz.
It's good to see you.
All right,
So when would you want to discuss a revised version of this?
Jim is gone until the 31st, I believe. He's probably gonna need some time when he comes back, so I would say a month.
Okay, so when is
Is
your
that
meeting in
okay?
February?
So that same February 24th, yeah. And I will, as soon as he comes back. I'll
Okay.
see if that's okay with him.
I can't do February.
That's okay.
I have a 40B here.
The next one is, March 10th.
Okay, I'll put it in for March.
March 10th is okay, yeah.
Okay.
Could we see if we should put that in?
Yeah, he's more valuable than I am with this. He need to use that.
March 10th.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Maybe.
Okay. Oh, no problem. And there's nothing else.
No, this has been great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so next up on our agenda, I'm so. Yes, yes, yes.
Not to bring this up because it wasn't on our agenda.
Yeah.
Well, it came up in a prior meeting that we were gonna submit to town council about developers trying to get around the 200-foot frontage by making a
Oh,
circular drive.
yes,
Did that
yes.
ever get, not that we need an answer tonight, but did that ever get submitted over to them?
Let's ask her.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking of work requests, I also want to ask Rebecca if we could get a GIS analysis to tell us how many of those parcels we have.
Oh, God.
Acre plus with less than 200 frontage. Yeah, oh, yeah. it's
So
just
I actually came across a plat of my yard, found out that some of our yards is partly. I thought it was just the neighbors, so we have like.
Yeah.
Little triangles as it goes up and down.
Oh,
Excuse me, Amy, can we just? Quick thing, we do have a question. Sure. We're starting to see, we're seeing more and more paper cul-de-sacs.
Yes.
And so we would kind of like some guidance on how to, we've been doing that, right? My neighborhood, it's built 97, it's that way. But we're a little concerned that, concern's the right word, but we've been discussing about the fact that we're going to see more and more of these properties is the available properties. As fewer properties become available in Duxbury, the remaining lots will be kind of oddly shaped. And so we're concerned about like having a regular, a street maybe with lots of neighborhoods, houses that are uniform, but then there's maybe this little bitty sliver that somebody can get into. And we're just would like some guidance on
Yeah.
that.
Amy, I sent you an
Yeah.
email about that.
Yeah.
I looked into it.
Okay.
So maybe when you come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's about
it
that.
goes back to you have to look at your subdivision, rules and regulations. And if it meets your subdivision rules and regulations. It can be done. The definition, I also looked at the definition of frontage in your zoning bylaw, that doesn't really help us. Because, it's a pretty general definition of frontage, it doesn't have anything with regard to arcs, some of them have. Language with regard to curves and arcs and things like that, but yours does not, yours is pretty standard, so. But I can get you more of a formal, I'll have more information.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. If we could add that to that March meeting, yes, that'd be great.
Yes,
Amy,
yep.
thank you.
I'll, follow up the email.
Yes.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, so let's move on to administrative, agenda item number 4. If it's okay with the board, I'd suggest we go ahead and start at the park side. We were actually hoping to get you in before. Sorry.
It's my fault.
No, no.
I'm supposed to be at the last meeting, I get my paperwork.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, so we wanted to talk to you, are here to talk about approving the performance bond, releasing lots A, B, and C. I don't have my, I haven't done this, can you mind just kind of reviewing this? Because there are. Just we're approving the one performance bond to release, but A, B, C.
It's ABC and that's it. There's
And the sidewalk.
in the sidewalk.
Okay.
So 160.
166
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask Rebecca for a second. Sorry. Do you need any?
No,
No.
we were discussing something previous.
Sorry. So, we have a gentleman here from Parkside Division.
I have the form here for you to sign. Is that what you were
Yes,
asking?
so were there any concerns?
No.
Anything like it's an order, is this just a formality?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really for, I got it here in the notary.
Good.
Right there.
Right.
Second.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I think we should go ahead and sign. Yeah, enough people.
I don't know, I might need to make a floor, or is it gonna work on?
I wasn't planning.
Oh, you are,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I just want to make sure, there's no questions. I'm down there.
Oh, yeah, it needs to be notarized.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions about? This? Let's see if we can go forward.
But I can stamp it tomorrow.
Well, I'll probably be around.
So I think, do we probably need a motion?
You do.
Would anybody like a motion to approve the performance bond releasing lots A, B, and C and the sidewalk for Parkside subdivision?
time we're covered. Yes, so moved.
Second. Are we putting the form, is that the motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, any discussion? We'll vote to approve the motion, starting with, we don't need to do roll call now, so all those in favor? Aye. But all done. Yeah, okay, the motion passes. All right, thank you, sorry for waiting, and I think there's a question about the street names too.
We're too far along.
Pardon?
We're too far along to change it.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yeah, we have, we have the recorded subdivision plan.
Okay.
The assessors assess the addresses on all the lots.
Oh,
And that'll create a nightmare.
okay,
Because that happened to me in one project and
okay,
didn't get mail for years.
Oh, okay,
So-
okay,
So, and also the HOA documents have been filed,
okay,
so. But the names that, I didn't come up with those names, I worked with a historian on.
yes, and somebody, he came back to us and said he had some suggestions. Tony Kelso came back,
Oh, we did.
yeah.
So it's too late. We can respond to him.
Yeah, I was actually, I came here tonight just in case it came up.
Yeah.
I'll plan to respond to you guys tomorrow and just say I'm sorry. but-
Yeah, I told Emily it wasn't on the agenda to talk about,
Oh, okay.
so.
I brought it up.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
okay, it's fine, but, so we don't need to put it on a future agenda item, it sounds like, because,
Yeah, I'll just respond to the email, you sent me,
okay,
because everything's on record and everything.
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, we have to.
I'm sorry you stayed here the whole time, just heard that, I feel bad.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I enjoyed the MBTA.
Yeah, it's important.
Well, I have a project with an MBTA down in Rockland,
Okay,
but it's appropriate to say. In Hingham, they did do the zoning like over by the shipyard, and then they got one. Like 9 acre site, because they didn't have enough acreage, but they dropped the density down to 8 acre. So that they averaged out.
As long as it's average to 50.
Yeah, I was doing 20 something.
Yeah, well, over it, it's the Avalon property and Hingham, they're already at 60. And they zoned them at 50, so that's never gonna go anywhere.
Right.
You know, so that's, but they use that higher density to average it out, so maybe you can take a look at that. And Mr. Ray, you're right, developers are looking at these ADUs, because I was looking into it at my house today.
you're gonna build, or you're gonna bring in a modular? Prefab, there we go.
Prefab. Figure I can raise the value of my house, so when I'm retired in a couple of years. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah, thank you. Sorry about the wait, appreciate it.
No.
All right, so we have things administrative for us. We need to vote for the planning board member to join the recodification, and we need to and Metropolitan Area Planning Council and Open Space Committee. I had offered to be on the zoning recodification. Is there anybody else who would rather do that? Okay, all right. Well, we can all, people are still welcome. So do we just want to vote those? Can we vote those all in at once, or do we need to have 3 separate motions?
You can do it all on.
Can I just ask a quick question? I have an interview for the Alden Building Planning Committee. Would that take place at the open space? If I get on that? Or do I potentially do it both?
And that'd be a big job, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often is open space?
Once a month.
No. I don't think, I don't know, do you know if any of the school building committees, has that been a?
What's the?
Who runs the open space meetings? Is that you?
Kathy Cross.
She's,
She's the chair.
is there any town staff that oversees it and does minutes and all that?
Wayne is the planning board rep.
Yeah, he was gonna switch. He's gonna do MEPC now.
Oh.
So, but is,
Switch with you.
so who takes the minutes for the meetings, you know? Like, was there any staff that go to that?
No, I bet Kathy Cross probably does. Or maybe Todd Loring.
Maybe Lauren can just for a few minutes until this project's over.
That's all right. I'll just do both.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'll do both.
Okay, well, thank you for
If it's too much though, we can try to,
figure something else.
yeah,
out.
we can figure something else out. How long is the building committee gonna be?
It'll be years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Is Alden the
yeah.
school? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, oh yeah, see, that's a
It's just.
thing.
Yeah, that's what I-
Is that just kicking offline? Is that just started?
Yeah,
It is, yeah. Are they looking at rebuilding the whole?
rebuilding, yeah, they did the roof a couple, I think this summer.
When did they get the roof a couple?
It
Was
was
it a year?
Band-Aid.
Okay, yeah, so y'all wanna just vote this?
I'd like to make 3 motions at once.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. Vote quickly, I recommend Kristen Rapp as the planning board representative, of the zoning bylaw recodification work, the select board appoint Lawrence LaRose, the planning board representative of the open space committee, and recommend the select board appoint Wayne Dennison as Duxbury delegate for the Holland area planning council, is that correct?
Yes, we have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, the minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, she doesn't have them ready.
Okay.
I'm reading a post-it. I'm reading a post-it note here, and
Okay,
it
that's
says
fine.
they will be ready for the next planning board meeting.
Okay, anything administrative for us? Oh, there's one thing, March 15th, I think, it's the, there is a regional, group in, what's the meeting in Worcester, do you remember, Rebecca?
Say that again?
The meeting in Worcester, it's like March, their annual meeting is,
Oh,
March
um,
15th.
yeah, the CP.
It's really, they had some really great, it's a annual meeting and they have sections that would be really relevant to what we do, like. Learning more about your zoning, your subdivision rules and regulations, how to run a planning board meeting, things like that.
It's the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative. Their conference is March 15th. It's an annual day conference for planning board members, planners.
Anybody's interested?
Good in Boston.
It's in Worcester at Holy Cross.
Okay.
They've had it there for years.
So if anybody's interested, put that on.
I might go if you guys are interested. We can.
I'm gonna be traveling unfortunately, because I had that on my calendar. Well, would you mind putting that on the agenda for the future, just like for like as an FYI, just to kind of remind us?
I will. I think you're only gonna have one more meeting between
Okay.
now and then, but yeah.
You said March 15th?
Yeah,
That's Saturday?
I believe it is.
It is.
I know, that's exactly what you wanna do on Saturday.
Let's be.
I mean, if it gets me driving to a kid's sports event,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
in Western, then not be that bad.
Well, I was just training here for a planning board, and so if you're interested, would be a really.
There's a free webinar on the IG's office. I sent it to Tara today. and It's about roles and responsibilities of planning board members. I can send you that link as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
And CPTC has materials as well.
All right, anybody have any information to share about their?
Yes.
No, bike and sidewalk doesn't meet until the beginning of February, so I don't think it's.
Housing Trust to cancel a meeting, so.
I haven't tried to open space
Yeah,
yet.
so, and the coastal resiliency met tonight at 4:30 at the select board meeting, so they're not gonna help. People to go. So, all right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.